Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to each and every one of you. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day so far. Today we are going to be testing out Tiny Tina's Wonderlands to see how this game performs on a 5950X CPU with an RTX 3080 GPU and 32 gigabytes of RAM. That's my computer. That is a decently high build, I would have to say. It's no 3090, but it's a decently high build. And so this is sort of a high-end testing of Wonderlands to see how it actually performs on some high-end PC parts. So if you guys have anything less than what I have, then you guys can take these numbers and kind of scale them down accordingly, and you guys should be able to figure out your performance based off of mine here. So before we jump into it, I would just like to say thank you very much for watching this video. If you guys are new here and you guys like my style, you guys like how I am, if you guys like these videos and the quality content that I try to produce here, feel free to hit that subscribe button on your way out. And if you guys want to go that extra little step, we do have a merch link down below, and we do have a Patreon link down below as well. The merch link has some pretty cool looking stuff in it, and the Patreon has some pretty cool perks in it as well. Some of them are more focused towards my Twitch side of things, which, speaking of that, is a good segue into my Twitch side of things as well. I do stream on Twitch pretty much most days of the week for at least 6 hours to 8 hours almost every day, with only maybe 1 or 2 days off here and there. So if you guys want to come hang out with me on Twitch, maybe drop a Prime sub over there, that'd be awesome as well. But either way, happy to have you guys here. Hopefully you guys enjoy your stay, and without further ado, let's go test some Wonderlands. Alright, so as you guys can see here, we are running the game in DirectX 12 mode. We're doing full screen testing at 1080p. I was going to test out 1440p and 4K as well, but this game I do not believe allows me to run those resolutions properly, simply because my monitor is only a 1080p 144Hz monitor. So whenever I tried to test this game out at 4K, it didn't look any different, and even the frame rate numbers didn't adjust at all. So I'm assuming that I can't actually run those resolutions in this game. Other games let me do that. Other games let me run 1440p and 4K with my monitor only being 1080p. But this game doesn't seem to allow that, so we won't be testing those resolutions in this video here. I do apologize for that. But at least you guys will get the 1080p numbers here, and again, you guys can scale them down accordingly as well for your resolution, for your computer specs. So take everything that happens here with a grain of salt and just kind of adjust it and scale it down to your level. So in the advanced settings here, we are going to use the badass quality preset, which, I mean, that's basically just everything turned up to ultra here. We have motion blur off. I'm actually the heathen that likes motion blur, but in this game, I was getting some frame rate drops down to like the 50 FPS range while on stream, which granted I was dropping maybe 20 frames lower than I would normally without the stream. So if I wasn't streaming, I would only get like 70 FPS and it might be a better experience there, but because I was streaming this, I was probably getting about 50 FPS in some areas, and then actually with DirectX 11 on, when I was streaming, I was only getting like 20 to 30 FPS. Like, it was completely unplayable then. So I'm not sure what that was all about, but the overall graphic settings that we're going to be using here is the badass settings here. So if you guys want to copy all these down or anything, then you guys are more than welcome to copy them down if you guys want to. So the plan is to jump into a benchmark run here at DX12 1080p ultra settings, and then we're going to do the same thing but in the actual gameplay, so you guys can see if the benchmark stats match up with the actual gameplay stats, because sometimes benchmarks just don't. So without further ado, let's go ahead and run the benchmark at 1080p, DX12, and at ultra settings. Let's go. Alright, so here we are within the benchmark. We're already getting 144 FPS right off the bat, but I do see that drop there. Yep, there's the drop. I knew it was going to happen. So we're getting about 120-ish FPS now, using 13, almost 14 gigabytes of RAM there on the numbers on the right-hand side of the screen. Those are the Riva Tuna numbers that I have going on, so you guys can see all of the RAM amount, the CPU amount, all of the CPU cores. We have all 32 of them there. You can see each individual core, how much is being used. And we have the memory, which is the green memory up top. That's the VRAM that we're using, which is only 5 gigabytes. And then you have the GPU numbers, which you can see the temperature, and you can see the percentage it's actually using, and the speed, the clock speed it's running at as well. So all of the numbers you're going to want to watch are on the right-hand side of the screen. So as of right now, the game is only using 14 gigabytes of our 32 gigabytes of RAM, which is not terrible at all. That's actually really, really nice to only use 14 gigabytes. That leaves a lot of room for like Windows or the applications being open. The VRAM only using half of our 3080's VRAM. So the 3080 has 10 gigabytes, and this is only using 5 gigabytes of VRAM. It is actually using 100% of our, basically 99% of our 3080 right now at 1080p, so I could only imagine what 4K would be doing. But these numbers are pretty high for frame rates, so if you're running at 4K, you probably would still be getting 70 to 80 FPS at 4K, I would assume. Ooh, a little bit of a stutter there. That was a drop down to like the 90s, or if not even lower. That was a pretty big drop. So you can see here in the benchmark results that we averaged 133 FPS at 1080p in DX12 at ultra settings in the benchmark. So those are pretty good numbers. In the benchmark at 1440p or 4K, I don't guarantee that you would get the same numbers. You probably would get around, I would say 110 average for maybe 100 average at 1440p, and then 4K would be like an 80 to a 90 average, if not a little lower than that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in now and conclude this video with a quick run through of a little bit of story stuff, not spoiler story stuff, but just running through the areas to see how they perform and how many frames we get. Let's go. All right, so here we are. I loaded in to the mission that I thought would be a good test for this because there's a lot of particle effects and enemies going on. There's actually a lot going on in this scene here. So that area back over there was probably one of the worst areas we've seen so far for frame rates. And I'm going to see if I can go back over there and show you guys once again. So far, we're still getting about 120 FPS, 130 FPS average. So the benchmark so far was pretty accurate. If we start doing some combat, start getting some particles going, not too bad. It's handling it pretty well, actually. I'm not handling it well, but the game is. I promise I'm not this bad at video games on my live stream. Alright, so I've cleared out the enemies, and we can kind of take another look at this area and just kind of watch the frames as we circle around. Somehow this game is using 99% of my GPU, though, and that's sort of the confusing part, is I don't know how. These games are not the most graphically intense games you'll ever play, and somehow it's maxing out your GPU. My 3080's at 99%, so I don't know how that's happening, but it is. And then my memory is at, 5.8 gigabytes right now, so not too bad. For VRAM usage, this game could be run on, like, basically any card. The only thing you would have to do for anything lower than if you have, like, a 1060, you'd be fine. You might have to turn down the texture quality slightly to kind of get it running. Maybe like not ultra settings, maybe like a medium to high settings, because the texture quality might be maxing out your 1060 VRAM. But other than that, not too bad. So we're just going to run through and do some combat in these areas to see how the game can actually handle some of the combat here. And then I would like to show you guys sort of the main town on my other character. The character that I actually use on stream, I want to show you guys the main town in that area. And we will see what the performance looks like in the main town. Because as cool as these areas are, sometimes they don't exactly show you the most honest frame rates for certain things, so maybe a town with more NPCs would. So we're going to do that in a second as well. Alright, so now we are over here in this other side of the town. This was, at least on my stream, this was the area that I was dropping down into the 40s while streaming. So when we're up here, you can see that we're getting probably like mid-90s. So there was a bit of a drop and a difference in between the streaming and not streaming numbers here, but I'm not sure what would cause it. Typically, whenever I stream a game, I only drop maybe 10 to 20 frames per second because of the actual streaming process. So I'm not sure what exactly would be causing this big of a difference in streaming to not streaming, but you can see here that we are getting about 97-ish FPS now that it's kind of stabilized. So this is probably the most demanding that I've seen it go in this earlier section of the game. And again, while I was streaming, it was actually kind of almost unplayable because at times it was going down to 40 FPS, and that's why I have the motion blur turned off. So in this scene here, we're getting 93 to 94 FPS looking here. So we're using 14 gigabytes of our RAM, still 13-ish to 15% of our CPU there on the just above the RAM number. But then you can see each core isn't really, I mean, like one, maybe two cores are at 50% usage, but the rest of them aren't even really being touched. So it should leave room for other background processes or streams or whatever you guys are doing in the background, but it also doesn't seem to be really utilizing the CPU very much. And it seems to be making your GPU max out at 99% as well, which is super weird because I'm at 1080p. So it's kind of interesting. But this is the lowest we've gotten is a 93 so far. So in terms of overall frame rate, 93 is not terrible at all. Not at all. And if you're running at 1440p or 4K, I would assume that 4K would be running at like 60 FPS in an area like this. 1440p getting maybe 70 to 75 FPS, something around there. And then if you're running any lower hardware, like if you're running like at maybe a 2070 or something, you would probably be getting about 70 to 80 FPS here as well. So again, you can take these numbers and scale them down accordingly, so that way they match your PC build and your resolution. So that's kind of the best way to show off this beginning area is here. That's why I made a new character and ran all the way to here, is so that way I could show you guys this scene. So, speaking of new character, I'm going to go back to my old character, the one that I'm actually running through on my stream, and I'll show you guys what the main town runs like. Because it has a lot of NPCs in it, it's actually a pretty big town, so we'll see what that runs like. It's not going to be like Witcher 3 levels of a town, but it's nice for a Borderlands game, so let's go check that out real quick. Alright, so here we are as the game loads all of the textures back in. That is another performance gripe that I would have with this game. I'm running this game off of a Gen 4 M.2. So it's a PCIe Gen 4 M.2. It's a 980 Pro. And it still kind of lags in the beginning of a new level loading. And you can see the textures popping in as it loads around me. So I'm not sure if that's a game optimization or if maybe the load screen just needs to be extended by like half a second to a second more, because you do see a ton of texture pop-ins and stuff like that while it's loading. But now that it's loaded in, you can see we're getting about 90-ish FPS, sometimes dropping down to the 80s within the town. And depending on where you look, it's about 80, like the lowest we're going to probably drop is, I think I've seen like a mid 80s. Yeah, there's an 86, and it's usually whenever there's a lot of NPCs on screen, you get like an 86 or an 87. And that's pretty much the lowest you're going to get. And in this scene here, we're still using 15 gigabytes of our 32 gigabytes of RAM. We are having about 17% CPU usage, roughly. Our VRAM is about 6, so again, even if you have a 2060 or something, or even like a 1060, I believe, whatever has like 6 gigabytes of VRAM, you might need to turn the game down to like a high to a medium setting, or at the very least, just turn down your texture quality, so that way you don't max out your VRAM. But in this area, while I'm streaming, I get about a 70 FPS, which, I mean, I wish it were higher, but that's probably just because I'm streaming and it's an extra layer of taxing preparation that it has to do to my PC because of the encoding process. And if you were encoding off of your GPU, there are times where it would also lag and overload the encoder in OBS as well, because we're running the GPU at 99%. It's the last like 5 to 10% of your GPU usage up at the top, up in this number here. This number, when it reaches like 90 to 95%, that's when your stream starts to bottleneck if you're using the NVENC encoder in OBS. So even on like a GPU stream, you might be seeing an encoding overloaded because of how much this game actually does try to utilize your GPU, which is great. You don't want it to be using like 50%, but it would be nice to not have it constantly at 99%, even only at 1080p. So a little bit of a cool showcase here of the main town. We can even run around and see that in other areas we do get about 100 FPS or so. And if we look towards like the main castle, we get about 120-ish, 115, roughly in that range. So as you kind of bounce around between like 120 and like 85 in this main town. So the main town is decently taxing because of the amount of NPCs here, which is why I wanted to show it off. So as you run around, there is a big fluctuation of performance. But again, take all these numbers with a grain of salt and adjust them and scale them down or up to your specifications. If you have a 3090 at 4K, you probably will be fine no matter what resolution or frame rate or whatever, you're going to be fine. If you have something like a 2060 or a 2080 or even a 1060, I feel like a 1060 could even run this game. Maybe not on ultra settings like you can for Borderlands 2, but you probably could get away with maybe like a medium to high settings for this game at 1080p. I totally could see that happening. But I think that would go ahead and do it for this video, guys. There's not much else to show. The DX11 numbers are just take all the numbers we get here and subtract like 15 from it, and that's the DX11 numbers. That's really all it is. Like DX11 is not, it's not any more stuttery. There's no frame drops. There's not, I mean, you drop like 15-ish frame rates by going to DX11, but that's on my hardware. So for your hardware, you might actually gain frame rate by going to DX11, so it's kind of hard to test. So that's why we're not going to include it in this video, but that will go ahead and do it for this video. You guys are freaking awesome for watching. Thank you very much for hanging out. Once again, if you guys enjoyed the video, if you guys enjoyed my presence, my quality content that I try to produce here, then feel free to hit that subscribe button on the way out. If you guys really liked my content, you guys can go ahead and go in the description. You'll find the merch link and the Patreon link, as well as my Twitch link. If you guys want to head over to Twitch and hang out with me over there, we will be playing this game live pretty much most days out of the week. So if you guys want to stop by, say hey, and maybe drop a Prime sub to show support, that'd be freaking awesome. And if you guys want to go visit the Patreon, look over some of the perks that we have. A lot of the perks that we have on Patreon are focused towards the Twitch community side of things for like VIP badges and stuff like that. But there are a few perks that you guys do get for being a Patreon subscriber for YouTube stuff. And I'm going to be reworking some of the perks as well to kind of fit more YouTube perks into the Patreon to make it more worthwhile for you YouTube people. And like I said, we do have a merch link as well where you guys can get some really cool Mr. J merch if you guys do want to do that. But with all of that being said, that's the big spiel at the end of the video. If you guys do like the video, feel free to hit, the like button. And if you guys disliked the video, well then too bad, because YouTube no longer shows dislikes. So, ha. But yeah, so that will go ahead and do it for the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate you guys stopping by and hanging out with me. And if you guys enjoyed the video, hit that subscribe button on your way out. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys!